So coming up this weekend is a lot of very high-level MMA, including UFC 322, which I did upload a nearly 1 hour long prediction video for, as well as UAE Warriors 65, headlined by Lany Silva as she does fight Michele Oliveira for the vacant title at women's strawweight. Alongside that, there is a very strong supporting cast on this card. 12-1 versus 11-0. Yakubov from UAE Warriors takes on Panales from Road to UFC. We also have other very high-level prospects from Abdulrakhman Magomedov school. Shamidkhan Magomedov fights for the first time since leaving the LFA. Osmanli versus Yunusov is 11-0 versus 10-0. Yamato Fujita is a very high-level regional guy taking on Reece McLaren, who fights for the first time since getting out of his one championship contract. And I feel like just top to bottom, this is a very strong card. And I'm actually going to break this card down from the top to the bottom. You will notice there is 14 fights on this card. I am going to be breaking down 11 of them. The 3 that I am missing, I just don't think are like high enough level for me to give a confident prediction on, if that makes any sense at all. I feel like with the regional guys that have very little experience, it's just a roll of the dice, really, when it comes down to me breaking down the fight if I'm not familiar with them that much. So that is why I'm breaking down only 11 fights on this card. I will also cover those fights in an article on the We Want Picks website. If you do sign up to WeWantPicks.com, use my code ARTEM for 10% off your first membership, and there is a link as well in the description of this video. On top of that, I also think that this is a very good poster. I would argue this is a better poster than the UFC's poster, especially considering the level of that card, but this is a great poster. This is a great card. It takes place on UFC Fight Pass on Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, on the 15th of November. I think that if you are really, really desperate to watch more MMA than just the UFC this weekend, this is probably the best card to watch it on, in my opinion, because this is a pretty good main event too. Lany Silva does take on Michele Oliveira for the vacant title. Lany Silva is a very high-level kickboxer. She does have professional kickboxing experience at a high level. She has fought for K1, I apologize, and on top of that, does just have other kickboxing professional experience for other Brazilian promotions. And then in the LFA, she went on a very good run, beat a lot of undefeated fighters in her move over to professional MMA, and even won the LFA title. Did lose to Aiza Bertolso, but Bertolso is going to be a very good fighter in the UFC one day, in my opinion. 7-0 as a pro, 16-1 as an amateur. She's a good fighter. I don't think there's much shame in losing, especially only at 23 years old. I think that in this fight, she's actually taking down a step down in competition against Michele Oliveira, who does have professional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience. But I also do think at the same time, I just don't think that she's going to be able to get the fight down to the ground against Silva. Now, Silva's takedown defense isn't amazing. In her 2 losses, she has lost to wrestlers, she has lost to grapplers. But I do think that she's going to be able to keep Oliveira at range, because Oliveira just has very basic boxing. And I think Silva is going to be able to win a decision in this fight too. It is also worth noting Silva does have a win over Rose Concheichao, who is a very good wrestler in her own right as well. I think that Lany Silva wins this fight in the main event. In the co-main event, we have Bruno Azeredo. I don't know what Azeredo has done to get in the good graces of the people over in the United Arab Emirates, because this guy fought against Anderson Silva in boxing in Dubai. And this is the Anderson Silva that he fought on that card. I think Floyd Mayweather was on this card as well, wasn't he? Am I being honest? Yeah, he was. This was the co-main event. So I don't know what we're done with that, I'll be honest. But on top of that as well, he's also been getting pretty good matchups in the UAE, and he's been getting a lot of wins, because he was 9-9 as a pro at one point, and now he's 18-9, and I think that he's going to beat Brentin Mumford here. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I know this is going to sound disrespectful, but I just don't know if Brentin Mumford is like a full-time, fully committed fighter at this point. And, you know, when you just look at his profile, I feel like that does get represented by the activity of him. The last time he fought was in 2024. The last time he fought before then was 2021. And he's just been very inactive. At one point, I would say in 2013, 2014, he was probably looked at as a very good prospect on the come up, but now maybe he's just a little bit older on in his career, and I do think he's coming in here against Azeredo, and I think he's going to lose to Azeredo as well. This is a step down in competition for Azeredo, and I think that also, on top of that, he's been knocking out pretty good guys. Of course, the great former UFC fighter Garagori, Babayev, this is a weird fight. It looked like Babayev slipped. I'm not entirely confident that he actually got knocked down in that fight, but it is what it is. And I do also think as well that Azeredo's a decent enough fighter. He's nearly 40 years old, but his striking's pretty good. And if I learned anything from watching Brentin Mumford's tape, I just don't think that he's got good striking defense, to be honest with you. He just comes out super aggressive, and I think Azeredo, with his own striking ability, is going to catch Mumford as Mumford's just charging in, throwing his combinations. And now we can move to Abdulrakhman Alimagomedov as he fights against Anvarbek Daniyalbekov. This is an interesting one. It is definitely a bit more of a wrestler versus striker matchup than anything, even though I have seen Daniyalbekov use a bit of wrestling in his career. I would say against Imam Shapi Mukhtarov, he had to deal with someone that was wrestling him a lot, and in that fight, he was able to reverse a lot of the positions that Imam Shapi was trying to put him in by attempting the takedowns. Then Daniyalbekov would defend them and then get the takedowns. And then aside from that, if someone wants to fight him on the feet, he's very happy to do so, because I would say that he mostly is a striker, which is why I did refer to this as a wrestler versus striking matchup. And I think that he's decent. Now, I'm not entirely sure if he's going to be like this elite level fighter, like the next Khamzat Chimaev or anything like that, but he's 11-0 and he has impressed me so far. And he is taking on a guy in Alimagomedov who just has not been active in his career at all. He's fought once in the last 4 years, and against Imran, I didn't really see much, because all he did was come forward against Imran Taynusilov and take him down, get into side control up against the cage and get a Chimera, and that was the fight. And then aside from that, I just didn't really see all that much that impressed me too much. Now, he did lose to Samanda Muradov, who I do think to this day is going to one day potentially be a UFC champion, but I mean, he just hasn't been active. He hasn't got a visa. Maybe he does have a visa, as the last I heard, but I'm getting sidetracked again. I do just think that we are going to see Daniyalbekov keep the fight on the feet and beat Alimagomedov. Another thing I will say about Alimagomedov too is this fight is at 190 pounds. Alimagomedov has fought at 170 in the past. He is 5'9". I thought he looked really small against Imran. I think he's going to look small against Anvarbek as well. Now, I don't think that Anvarbek's the biggest guy at 185 either, but I do think there's going to be a pretty significant size disadvantage on the Alimagomedov side. So I think that Daniyalbekov is going to win. I think he's going to beat Alimagomedov by knockout as well in the second round in this fight. Furkatbek Yukubov fights against Ruel Panales. Yukubov was already on the UFC's radar. As I think I said in the intro, he was on the Ultimate Fighter. Fought against Alibi Adiras, who then ended up making it into the finals. And he has only won and fought since then once. But I do think if he gets another pretty impressive win, maybe Yukubov just gets signed straight up into the UFC, because he's a very fun fighter. He is the type of fighter that I think the UFC wants. Now, he doesn't really have any cardio, but aside from that pretty glaring weakness, this guy will do absolutely anything he can possibly do to finish the fight in the first round. He is an explosive striker. He's an overly aggressive striker. He can also get submissions as well, which I think is important when you do take on someone like Panales, who just is a striker. I don't think that Panales really has any grappling ability, to be honest with you. So I think we're just going to see Yukubov come forward and just kind of run through Panales, either on the feet or on the ground. Now, Panales isn't like some sort of just can, because he is very good at striking. But the problem is he's not really good at anything else. And I think that Yukubov can probably just do a little bit more, a little bit better. I think Yukubov does go out there, and I think he does knock out Panales in this fight. Now we have Ahmed Faress versus Walter Cogliandro, and I'm not just going to sit here and pretend that I have a confident pick in this fight. Now, the first thing that I thought to myself when I watched Faress fight was, oh my goodness, this guy is massive for 145 pounds. This fight is taking place at 145. I don't know how this guy has made 145 in the past, or plans on making 145 in this fight, because unless my eyes deceive me and I just have no idea how big guys are supposed to be at this weight class, Faress is a very big welterweight, and I think you could even say the same against former Bellator legend, I should say one-time Bellator legend, Walter Cogliandro. Now, Faress was an interesting fighter to me, because I will be honest, I was watching him and I was like, oh, like I'm not really that impressed by him. I actually might be able to convince myself to pick Cogliandro in this fight, to be honest with you, but At the same time, you know, he's okay. Like, he's an all-right striker. He's on a massive win streak. He's got momentum, but I don't think that you can really put too much into that, really. I think from what I saw, he's a striker that has pretty good wrestling, and once he gets the fight down to the ground, he's very, very hard to get up from underneath of. As for Cogliandro, Cogliandro really is just sort of like a pressure striker, a bit more of a brawler than anything. Now, I do remember looking into him very extensively against the great Yves Landu in his fight on Bellator. I think that fight took place actually in Italy. And then since then, we have kind of seen him find some sort of levels of success. Beating Ali Alkhasov is quite impressive. But it does just seem like, especially in his most recent fight for the LFA, if he takes on someone that can pressure him, that can take him down, that can submit him, he's in trouble as well. I'm picking Ahmed Faress in this fight by submission or decision because I have seen Faress find a lot of success in the grappling, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm confident in this fight or that this fight is really anything as interesting as this fight between Sharapudin Ziyaudinov as he fights against Khaleed Laallam. Now, when I saw that Khaleed Laallam was from Sweden, I thought to myself, was this guy a training partner of Khamzat Chimaev? And little did I know when I looked into him, he has fought Khamzat Chimaev in Khamzat Chimaev's amateur debut, and that fight has like 5 million views on YouTube. And on top of that, I quite literally lost brain cells listening to the takes or reading the takes of Chimaev and Laallam as well in that. So yeah, the MMA community, it never fails to disappoint me, I will be honest. But he's also beaten Christian Leroy Duncan as an amateur. Now, this is worth noting, this is in 2017. This is nearly 10 years ago now. We're all getting old. And in professional MMA, I think he's looked pretty good, to be honest with you. Now, he does just kind of go out there and wrestle for the most part. And once he does get his takedowns, he doesn't really do much. And on the feed, he doesn't really have much to offer. But at the same time, I think it's more than what Ziyaudinov has to offer, because I watched Ziyaudinov's fight and I thought to myself, this guy is really short. So if it turns out that Ziyaudinov is also like 6'2", I clearly don't know what I'm looking at, but I really come to the conclusion when I watch Ziyaudinov fight that this guy's quite small himself, and I think he's smaller than Laallam. I also wasn't very impressed with the striking of Ziyaudinov. It was just kind of like early Khabib, early Islam Makhachev style striking, when you just throw in overhand boxing combinations to close the distance to get the takedown. And even then, he didn't really have good control over this guy, Amir Sayed Kia, for example, as well. And then aside from that, he is just kind of ground and pounding people out. I know that Laallam is like an interesting prospect that a lot of people have mixed opinions about, but I do think he's good enough to beat Ziyaudinov in this fight. So I am going to pick Khaleed Laallam here, who is actually the favorite on Tapology. So I'll be interested to see what the odds are when we do get round to those potentially coming out in the end. Shamidkhan Magomedov fights for the first time since leaving the LFA. I don't really know why he left the LFA, to be honest with you, but he's not with them anymore. He was their champion, actually, and had defended the title a couple of times, even fought on the Ultimate Fighter. So you guys know what's probably going to happen if he beats this guy impressively, and he does have a working visa, or whatever type of visa is required to get into the UFC. He probably is going to get signed, and I do think he's going to beat Snatana. I'm going to be open and transparent with you guys. I only watched one Snatana fight because I didn't think any of the other ones were going to be very important. Look at this guy's career. He's knocking people out in 30 seconds or less, or he's losing to actually a pretty good wrestler in Ramiro Cotton, in which he just got out-wrestled the whole time. Like, what is going on? What is actually happening? I think that Magomedov is going to go out there, out-wrestle Snatana, and the thing about Magomedov is he actually does have a pretty good ability to get submissions, which I will talk about later, because there's a very interesting Abdulrakhman Magomedov prospect on this card later on, who is like a BJJ wizard. It's very odd, but I think Magomedov is going to go out there and submit Snatana in this fight here. Now we have Mehemmedeli, Osmanli taking on Bakhtovar, Yunusov at 135 pounds, and this just comes down to two guys that are clearly very talented, but one of them was more impressive to me than the other. And that one that was more impressive to me was Mehemmedeli Osmanli. Now, I will admit I am familiar with Osmanli, and I'm not that familiar with Yunusov. And the reason is, this guy fought once in like 2 years. He was meant to fight Shuya Kamakubo in the LFA, which would have been awesome, but unfortunately that fight never happened, and then he fought to a draw against this guy that wasn't very good. I did think he'd win the fight, but he looked quite bad in that fight. I will be honest with you. He struggled to get the takedowns against this guy, Ibrahimov. You know, Ibrahimov was defending a lot of those takedowns in that fight, and that was of concern to me when you do take on someone like Osmanli, who I think has a very significant striking advantage in this fight. Now, I will admit, I'm going to put it out there, I don't think that Osmanli is the greatest prospect in the world right now, but he is 11-0. He has beaten decent competition. You know, it's not like he's just gone out there and fought absolute buns. A lot of these guys are undefeated fighters. However, I will also say this is definitely the toughest fighter he's ever fought against in his entire career. And it'll be interesting to see how he's going to deal with the pressure, the wrestling, and the control that Yunusov is going to try and put on him. Because Osmanli, in the past, has struggled with takedown defense. I think most notably, I believe it's the Shamil Borayev fight, which he struggled with the takedown defense in. But he did look a lot better in his fight after that against Faris Jacobs. And then aside from that as well, we have seen that he does have ability to get late submissions in round 5 or defensive submissions is where I was about to go with the Anaconda and the Ninja Choke. It is so hot in my room right now. It is unbelievable. But Yunusov, to talk about Yunusov, I wasn't that impressed. I didn't think that he had that much to offer on the feet. And I think that, honestly, if he fought Shuya Kamakubo, it would have been a mirror matchup. There's two guys that don't have anything to offer striking-wise that want to get takedowns. I think that Osmanli is the better, more well-rounded fighter in this fight. I'm going to pick him to win this fight with his striking, which I think is a lot better. Shakhban Alkhasov. This is the guy I was mentioning before. This is the Abdulrakhman Magomedov BJJ prodigy. I do see this on occasion. I think Shamidkhan Magomedov is a good example of this. It's these guys from Dagestan, the guys maybe that do train in the Khabib, or at least train in that sort of area of the world, that have really, really good submission ability. Now, when you do kind of think of someone like, I'm going to say it, like someone like Islam Makhachev, you don't think of Islam Makhachev that's just going out there and throwing up arm triangles, or he's going out there and throwing up triangles from his back, or he's getting arm bars and stuff like that. Alkhasov is a guy that I fully believe can do that. This guy is very much a jiu-jitsu sort of style fighter out of the Club Abdulmanak camp, which is quite interesting to me because that does tell me that he actually does have quite a lot of skills in the pure grappling to be able to kind of learn those sort of BJJ ability. And maybe this guy is like the secret Charles Oliveira protege, Charles Oliveira sort of style that they used to train Islam Makhachev up against. I don't know, but that's how he kind of fights. But I will admit, I also was a little bit disappointed in his losses. It kind of looked like he gassed out and quit on himself. I don't really put that word out there. I don't like saying that, but it did look like that. But to be fair, he did lose to some very talented fighters in Abdullayev, who has gone on to be like 19-3 right now, 21-3. And I think that Kunchenko just is a very experienced sort of veteran, even though he is like pretty old and was in the UFC at one point. But I think that Basir Saraliev impressed me even more. I really liked watching this guy fight. I'm quite interested to see the height difference, though. 6'3" versus 5'8" could be quite funny. But I thought he looked good against Evgeny Morozov, right? And Evgeny Morozov is a fighter that I am very familiar with. Yeah, I would say I'm very familiar with Morozov. And on top of that, Morozov actually has a very interesting fight coming up next, I should say, against James Yontop, which could be very big for you, Yontop, if he can win. Maybe you see Yontop back in the UFC at some point. I don't know. But as for Saraliev, he pretty much fought Morozov in a mostly striking matchup, and Saraliev is not a striker. He is a wrestler, so he showed that against another guy that does have pretty decent striking ability, he can really hold his own on the feet. And I quite liked seeing that out of Saraliev, because I think that if he keeps this fight on the feet against Alkhasov, he has the striking advantage in this fight. So I think that if Saraliev just doesn't go out there and do what he does do in quite a few of his fights and just shoot takedowns, I think he's the better striker in this fight. We've seen Alkhasov finished by TKO twice now. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Saraliev is going to be able to finish this fight by knockout. But the height difference is also quite hilarious, and I do look forward to seeing that play out. And now we have what I would probably consider to be the single highest level fight on this entire card. Reece McLaren just beat Jared Brooks in one championship in a massive, massive upset as a plus 525 underdog. And Jared Brooks is a very talented fighter, former UFC fighter, was disbanded from the UFC when the UFC did kind of part ways with the men's 125-pound division. But this is a guy who was in there with up-and-coming Figgy, went to a split decision with him. Jose Shorty Torres is also a very talented fighter still to this day, and lost to him too. And then after that, he kind of got released, found his own in one championship, beat Pacquiao in what was a massive fight at the time, and then lost him. And once again, what was a controversial yet massive fight at the time. And yeah, he lost to Reece McLaren, and what at the time, I'm going to say it again, it was a very big upset. And McLaren ever since then has been fighting to get out of this one championship contract, because I think that maybe the winner of this fight could find their way into the UFC. Reece McLaren is a wrestler grappler, and I think that he can hold his own relatively well on the feet too. But Yamato Fujita, this is at 135. This is at 125. Okay. I like that a lot more for Fujita, because he fought Juan Puerta at 130 pounds, I should say, sorry. And he looked tiny against Juan Puerta. Like, these guys look like they were 2 weight classes apart, honestly. And he beat Juan Puerta. It was a very slick victory for him, because he was finding success on the feet. He is a striker, a very small yet fast striker. Puerta took him down. Puerta was controlling him for a long period of time, had his back at one point, had him in mount at one point, and Fujita just kind of slipped out from underneath him and then ended up in mount and got a mounted guillotine, which was a very impressive grappling victory, and kind of a similar-ish story against Muhammad, I would say. But for the most part, Fujita, he wants to keep the fight on the feet. He wants to find success in the striking, and also he is a man that can say that he survived the first round against Yakubov, which not many people can say that they have done. And Yuki Ito, am I thinking of the same guy right now? I am not. I thought Yuki Ito was the guy that's the current Eternal Champion. Anyways, I think that we are going to see a striker versus grappler matchup, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. I actually do think that Reece McLaren is going to be the much bigger fighter out of the two in this fight. I think that Reece McLaren can get the takedowns and get the wrestling going. However, whoever wins this fight, I would like to see them in the UFC. I think that McLaren can be a guy that you can probably use in like a pitchy mix sort of experiment, where you use him to kind of test your top 15 level guys potentially, like just kind of put him in there with guys that are knocking on the door of the top 15. I think that McLaren, even versus Cody Durden, would be a fun sort of veterans matchup. Even like McLaren versus Charles Johnson. I mean, Charles Johnson accepts any fight. That would be a good one. But I'm going to pick McLaren. I'm picking McLaren by decision. And as I did say before, I'm not really breaking down these fights. I'll be honest, I haven't investigated them. However, I did see Shok Nazarov's fight in Octagon. This guy's a pretty wild dude. He's pretty fun. And then aside from that, let's talk about this fight, because I was interested in finding out about Pavel Andruska, because this guy's got good wins. He's got a win over a 7-0 opponent in Camilo Suarez, and this Camilo Suarez didn't really beat the best guys in the world to get that record, but he's no can. And Pavel Andruska looked good against him. I would say he had a pretty controversial win over Thiago Silva. Some back of the head shots involved in that one, but this guy's good, man. He can strike very well, and he can wrestle well. And he has taken on a wrestler in Dayomisi Zawipasi, who I have said in the past fights like the Chinese Khamzat Chimaev, because he does. He went out there against Ibrahim Ginting, took him down, submitted him in a minute. Went out there against Chang Ho Lee, who's in the UFC and actually has found some success now in his career. Did lose to Kouamba recently, but did beat Romeos in a pretty good domination, I would say. He was beating Chang Ho Lee and then he gassed out. And that's kind of a bit of a shame. And it's kind of the same sort of story without the rest of his career. He just doesn't really have much sort of gas tank controlling ability. He just wants to wrestle, man. And the thing about Andruska is I think Andruska, we're going to find out, is what I'm trying to say. Because I don't know for sure if Andruska is going to be able to defend every single takedown. But if he can, I think that Andruska is going to be good, because I think he's the much better striker. I was very impressed with the boxing of Andruska. He knocked out Enriquez Camilo Suarez with a very nice boxing combination that set up the KO anyway. And just in general, I think that this guy's boxing is very good. And I love high-level boxing in MMA. I just don't think that there's that many people in MMA that possess very high-level boxing. And I have some very controversial takes regarding that, for sure, if you guys have seen my other videos, kind of just in general, me talking about guys that I think people consider to be high-level boxers in MMA that I personally don't, but I think Andruska's one of those guys that could be one of those guys. I really do. This guy's impressed me a lot with this boxing. I'm going to pick him to win by knockout because of it. Let me know what you think, though, in the comments below. Are you going to watch this card? Are you going to watch my other videos? Because I am going to break down on video the Cage Warriors card, maybe, but also definitely the LFA card, because this is a good LFA card, man. You got Eileen Pereira on there, you got Gustavo Pintos on there, Joe Giannetti. I love Joe Giannetti. Nathan Garib, a former Bellator prospect, I want to come out and say. One fight in Bellator, I guess. This is a good card. This is a good card. I'll probably do the same sort of thing. I'll break down most fights, but not all. And for Cage Warriors, I probably will do most of the card. This is a good card as well for Cage. This is such a good weekend for MMA. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.